I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe to get it out of my system. Maybe because I just need someone, anyone, to tell me I'm not losing my mind. But right now, I feel like I'm drowning, trapped in this floating city in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by thousands of people, yet completely alone. This was supposed to be our dream vacation. A cruise, a 2-week getaway with my wife and kids, away from work, away from stress, away from everything. I thought it was exactly what we needed, and in the beginning, it was perfect. My wife Emma and I have always been different when it comes to vacations. I'm the type who likes to relax, maybe sit by the pool with a beer, watch a movie in the room after dinner. Emma? She thrives on socializing, on doing everything the cruise has to offer, concerts, parties, game nights, and I never had a problem with that. I knew she needed excitement the way I needed peace. So every night after dinner, she would head out to one of the ship's events while I stayed behind. The kids were glued to their tablets, and I was happy to unwind. The first few days were smooth. We even made some friends, a couple, James and Sarah, who were about our age. We had dinner with them a few times, chatted by the pool. They seemed nice. Everything seemed normal, and then the first crack appeared. It was a small thing, something I almost brushed off. One night, Emma came back late, giggling, smelling like wine. She flopped onto the bed and mumbled about how amazing the concert was, how much she danced, how much fun she had. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and went back to watching my movie. The next morning, my daughter Lily asked, "Mom, how was the concert?" Emma, still half asleep, groaned. "Oh, it was great, sweetie." And that's when Lily dropped the bomb. "But there was no concert last night. They canceled it because of technical issues." Silence. I looked at Emma, expecting some reaction. Confusion, surprise, anything. But she didn't even hesitate. She stretched, yawned, and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot. We ended up going to the bar with James and Sarah instead." It was a smooth recovery. Too smooth. I let it slide because why wouldn't I? It made sense. Maybe she just forgot. Maybe she had a little too much to drink and got confused. No big deal, right? Except something about it sat wrong with me. It was the way she answered, how fast she adjusted her story, like she'd rehearsed it in her head before saying it out loud. I should have let it go. I should have ignored the feeling in my gut, but I didn't. A couple of nights later, I decided to break my usual routine. My favorite football team was playing, and I wanted to watch the game in one of the ship's bars instead of in the room. I grabbed a beer, settled in, and as I was waiting for kickoff, I spotted them, James and Sarah. I waved, walked over, and they greeted me like an old friend. We made small talk, and then Sarah asked, "Hey, where's Emma? We haven't seen her in days." I blinked. What?" James chuckled. "Yeah, man, we figured you guys were just doing your own thing. We haven't run into you since, like, the second day." I forced a laugh, played it cool. "Oh, she mentioned you guys hung out the other night. At the bar?" Sarah frowned. "No, oh, wait. Maybe she meant someone else. We actually weren't feeling great that night. Stayed in our cabin the whole time." I smiled, nodded, sipped my beer. Inside, my mind was spinning. When the game ended, I walked back to our room in a daze. Maybe Emma had made a mistake, mixed up names. Maybe she had met other people and just never told me. But why would she lie about being with James and Sarah? Why make up a cover story? I was so lost in thought I almost didn't notice her. Emma. Standing in the hallway near the elevator, talking to a man I didn't recognize. They weren't touching. They weren't doing anything wrong. But there was something about the way they stood. Close enough that their bodies almost brushed against each other. Something about the way she tilted her head, the way he smirked at her like they shared. Some private joke. I slowed my steps, watching. And then, just like that, she turned, saw me, and her entire expression changed. Not fear, not guilt, just a shift. Like she had quickly adjusted a mask. She smiled and waved me over. "Hey, babe. This is Adam." Adam. He was tall, well-dressed, a little too charming. He stuck out his hand, grinning. "Nice to meet you, man." I shook it, my grip firmer than necessary. "Yeah, same." Emma looped her arm through mine like nothing was off. "I ran into Adam earlier at the lounge. He's here with some friends." I nodded, playing along, but something about it didn't sit right. I didn't say anything that night. What could I say? Hey, Emma, why did you lie about hanging out with James and Sarah? Hey, Emma, why were you acting weird with that guy? It would make me sound paranoid, insecure, and maybe I was, so I let it go. Again. But that feeling in my gut? It was getting worse, and I wasn't ready for what was coming next. I wish I could say that night was the last time I saw him. That Adam was just some random guy Emma had a casual conversation with, and that was the end of it. But it wasn't. For the next few days, that feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I wasn't the jealous type. I never had been. But something was wrong, and no matter how much I tried to brush it off, it kept gnawing at me. Emma was different. Not in some huge, obvious way, but in small things. She seemed more distant, more distracted. She was on her phone more than usual, even though I knew we barely had service out here. And then, there were the nights. She kept going out. Every night, it was the same. She'd get dressed up, tell me she was heading to a concert or some themed party on the ship. And every night, she'd come back late, flushed, tipsy, and happy. Too happy. I tried not to let it get to me. Maybe she just needed this. A break. Some fun. We had been married for years. Maybe this was just her way of unwinding. But then came the moment I couldn't ignore. It was around midnight when I woke up. The room was quiet, except for the soft sound of the ship cutting through the ocean. I reached over to Emma's side of the bed. Empty. I sat up, blinking away the grogginess. She hadn't come back yet. I checked the time. 12:07 a.m. I sighed, ran, a hand through my hair, and grabbed a bottle of water. Maybe she was just caught up in the party. Maybe I was being ridiculous. And then my phone buzzed. It was Lily. Lily, 12:08 a.m. Dad, are you awake? I frowned. My daughter rarely texted me, especially not in the middle of the night. Me, 12:09 a.m. Yeah, what's up? Lily, 12:09 a.m. I couldn't sleep, so I went to the arcade. I saw Mom. I stared at the screen. My heart started beating faster. Me, 12:10 a.m. Okay. And Lily, 12:10 a.m. She wasn't alone. She was with that guy. The one from the hallway. I got up so fast I nearly knocked over the nightstand. I didn't even think. I just threw on a hoodie, slipped on my shoes, and stepped out into the dimly lit hallway. The arcade was on the same deck as the late-night lounge. I didn't run. I forced myself to walk, my hands clenched into fists. When I got there, I didn't have to search. Through the glass window of the lounge, I saw them, Emma and Adam, sitting at a small corner table. She was laughing at something, he said, leaning in closer than she needed to. He had one arm draped casually on the back of her chair, his fingers almost grazing her shoulder. It wasn't some dramatic, obvious affair. There were no stolen kisses, no hands under the table. But I knew. It was in the way she looked at him, like he was the most interesting person in the world, like she wanted to be nowhere else but right there, in that moment, with him. I stood there for what felt like forever, watching. I wanted to go in. I wanted to confront her, to say something, anything. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked away. Back in our room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. I could still hear the faint sound of the ocean, the distant murmur of people enjoying their vacation. Emma came in about 20 minutes later. I heard her quietly shut the door, slip off her shoes. She didn't think I was awake. I stayed still, pretending to be asleep. She climbed into bed, sighing softly as she pulled the covers over herself. And then, barely above a whisper, she let out a quiet little laugh. I don't think she even realized. She did it. That was the moment I knew I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering when everything had started falling apart. And the worst part? I still didn't have the strength to confront her. Not yet, but I would. I don't know why I didn't confront her that night. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear the truth. Maybe I was afraid of what I would see in her eyes if I asked. But after that, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning at breakfast, everything felt normal. Too normal. Emma was cheerful, chatting about the day's activities, asking the kids if they wanted to try the rock climbing wall. She was the same as always. But I wasn't. I kept replaying last night over and over in my head. The way she laughed. With him, the way she leaned in just a little too close. And worst of all, that quiet little laugh she let out when she thought I was asleep. I needed to know. So I started watching. Not in some crazy, obsessive way. Just paying attention. And the more I watched, the more I saw it. Emma's routine was different now. She didn't just go to concerts and parties. Sometimes she would disappear for a few hours in the middle of the day, claiming she went to the spa or for a walk around the deck. Sometimes, when we were all at the pool, she would say she was running back to the room to grab something, only to be gone way longer than necessary. And sometimes I caught glimpses of him, Adam, always lingering in the background, never obvious, never enough to raise suspicion if I wasn't looking for it. But I was. One afternoon, while Emma was getting a massage, I walked past one of the quieter lounges on the ship, and there he was, sitting at a table, alone. I stood there for a second, debating whether to just walk away, but then he looked up. Our eyes met. For the briefest moment, something flickered across his face, recognition, maybe even amusement. He gave me a small, polite nod, like we were nothing more than two strangers passing by each other, and something inside me snapped. I walked over, slowly, deliberately. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he seemed entertained, like he was waiting for this moment. "Hey," I said, sitting down across from him. He smirked. "Hey." Silence. I studied him, trying to figure out what kind of man he was. He didn't seem nervous. He didn't seem guilty. He seemed like someone who knew he had nothing to lose. "Small world, huh?" I said. He chuckled. "Yeah. Crazy how you keep running into the same people on a boat." I forced a smile. "You know, my wife mentioned you." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Said you guys met in the lounge, became friends?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, she's great." That was it. No details. No elaboration. Just that smug, knowing smirk. I felt my hands clench under the table. "You travel alone?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly, considering. Me. "No. Came with some friends." I waited for him to say more. He didn't, and that's when I realized what he was doing. He wasn't denying anything, but he wasn't admitting anything either. He was letting me dig. Letting me twist myself into knots. Because he knew that as long as I didn't have proof, Emma could always lie. She could always tell me I was paranoid. And he would let her. I stood up. "I'll see you around," he said casually, taking a sip of his drink. I walked away without another word. I didn't tell Emma about the conversation. I didn't need to, because by then I had made up my mind I was going to catch them. Not just hints, not just suspicions. I needed to see it with my own eyes. That night, I pretended to be exhausted. Told Emma I was staying in, watching a movie with the kids. She hesitated for half a second before giving me a quick kiss and saying, "Okay, I won't be too late." Liar. Waited exactly 15 minutes after she left. Then I followed. I kept my distance, moving through the crowded halls, staying out of sight whenever she glanced over her shoulder. She wasn't being cautious. She thought I was in bed. She walked past the bars, past the lounges, past the main entertainment deck, and then she turned down a hallway that led to the private cabanas. I slowed my steps, my heart hammering in my chest. She stopped outside one of the doors, glanced around, and knocked twice. The door opened. Adam. I stood there, hidden just around the corner, watching as she slipped inside. He closed the door behind her. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. My whole body was shaking. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. I thought about knocking, about kicking the door in, about screaming, but I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked away. Back to our room. Back to my kids. Back to a marriage that in that moment I knew was officially dead. And the worst part? I still didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic hum of the ship cutting through the ocean. Emma was still out. The kids were asleep, curled up in their beds, lost in their own innocent dreams. And me? I was wide awake, replaying every single moment in my head. The lies, the excuses, the stolen glances, the quiet laughs, the way she had. Walked into that room without a second of hesitation. I wanted to be angry. God, I wanted to be furious, but I wasn't. I just felt hollow. Because the truth was, I had seen it coming. Maybe not the details, maybe not him, but I had felt it. That slow, creeping distance, the way she looked past me instead of at me, the way I had become an afterthought in my own marriage, and now I had proof. The woman I had spent years building a life with had walked into another man's room, closed the door behind her, and left me standing outside like a fool, and I had done nothing. When Emma finally came back, it was almost 3 a.m. I heard her slip off her heels, quietly undressing, trying not to wake me. I could feel her presence, the weight of her body shifting the mattress as she slid under the covers. She sighed softly, a satisfied kind of sigh. I wanted to turn over, look at her, say something, anything. But what would I even say? I know. I saw you. I watched you walk into his room like I didn't exist. I stayed silent. Morning came, and I went through the motions. We had breakfast as a family. The kids were talking about some magic show they wanted to see that night. Emma smiled at me across the table, her expression perfectly normal, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just torn me apart piece by piece the night before. I watched her, studying every move she made, how effortlessly she played the role of the loving wife, the devoted mother. How easy it was for her to pretend. I felt like a ghost in my own life. And then, that afternoon, I finally broke. We were in the cabin alone. The kids were at an onboard activity. Emma was getting ready for dinner, fixing her hair in the mirror, humming softly to herself, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped together, my whole body tense. And then, before I could stop myself, I said it. I know. She froze, just for a second, just long enough for me to catch it. Then she turned, eyes wide with carefully measured confusion. You know what? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I saw you. Silence. She blinked, tilting her head slightly. Saw me where? Don't do this. Don't insult me. Don't lie to my face. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. I followed you last night. I saw you go into his room. Her whole body stiffened. For the first time, real panic flickered across her face, but she recovered quickly. She always did. Babe. She took a slow step toward me, her voice soft, soothing. Like I was the one who needed calming down. It's not what you think. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, really? Then what was it, Emma? Because from where I was standing, it looked pretty damn clear. Her eyes filled with something. Guilt, fear, maybe even regret. And then, just like that, she broke. She sat down beside me, hands shaking as she reached for mine. I messed up. Her voice cracked. God, I don't even know what to say. I didn't mean for this to happen. I stayed still, letting her words sink in. You have to believe me, she whispered. It was stupid. It was just... I got caught up in the moment. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything. That phrase hit me harder than I expected, because to me, it meant everything. I pulled my hand away, running it through my hair, trying to process what the hell I was supposed to do next. I love you, she said, her voice desperate now. I love our family. I would never. This isn't who I am, I scoffed. It is, though. It is exactly who you are. Her face crumpled. No, it's not. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and I saw it. She was terrified. Not of losing me, of losing the life we built together. This wasn't about love. This was about keeping the illusion alive. I had two choices. I could walk away. I could destroy everything. Let this vacation end with divorce papers and a custody battle, or I could stay. For the kids. For the life we built. For the years we had spent together. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the floor, trying to make a decision that would change my life forever. And then finally, I exhaled. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. My voice was raw. But I can pretend. Emma's breath hitched. What do you mean? I looked up at her, my eyes empty. I mean, we go home. We act like nothing happened. We raise our kids, we go to PTA meetings, we spend Christmases. Together. We keep the family intact. She let out a choked sob, nodding frantically. Yes, that's all I want. I swear to you it will never happen again. I believed her. And I also didn't. Because every time she kissed me, I would wonder if she was thinking about him. Every time she left the house, I would wonder if she was meeting someone else. Every time she said, I love you, I would hear a lie. But I had made my choice. So when we stepped off that cruise, hand in hand, smiling for the kids, we looked like the perfect couple. And nobody would ever know that our marriage had already sunk to the bottom of the ocean.